Welcome to Killer Genes. On this episode, a father's worst nightmare.
I looked around and then I found her. And that was the worst day of my life.
This cold case can be cracked and a killer brought to justice.
So it's our understanding that they have DNA.
Important information in the murder of Angelina Sicola.
Let me first tell you that I'm going to share something that hasn't been shared publicly, but I think it's interesting to share because it might open up some conversation.
Thank you for being here. I'm Melissa McCarty. If you are new here, allow me to briefly introduce myself. I've spent nearly 15 years traveling the country as a crime correspondent, interviewing not only those who have committed these heinous acts, but also their victims and the families left in the wake of these tragedies. Through this platform, I aim to share firsthand accounts and insights from those most intimately affected by these heartbreaking events. My goal is to shed light on stories that call for your attention and to honor the memories of those unjustly taken. And if you haven't done so already, I would love for you to take a second, hit the subscribe button, and join me here each week. Now this week, I'm bringing you a story that will resonate deeply within your heart. A father recounts the unimaginable moment he discovered his daughter's body. Now, through his words, we feel the profound grief of a family torn apart, living each day in the shadows of uncertainty, longing for answers. The case, though brimming with evidence, has yet to bring justice. This father and the family's hope remains, and in sharing their pain with me and with all of you, it's with the hope of one day ending and finding the truth, ending the trauma, getting closure they so desperately want and deserve. Let's meet Angelina Sicola, affectionately called Angie by her family. She was a 20-year-old sophomore at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs is known as Olympic City, USA, and it's also home to the United States Olympic and Paralympic headquarters and training centers. Now, turns out, Angie herself, she was a rising star athlete, obtaining her black belt in Taekwondo and teaching at a local academy. She was the youngest of a blended family and had aspirations much like other young women her age. But all of that would be taken away from her in 2013 when she was found dead in her apartment. It is a day forever scarred in her father's mind. Angie had a really close-knit family growing up. She was surrounded by a loving father named Steve, her mom Pam, her sister Amber, stepsister Susan, and her stepmother Jane. Now, the story they are about to tell you, it is gut-wrenching. As this case, it's gone cold. But it does have the possibility of being solved at any moment. And you'll hear more about that a little bit later on. Her stepmother Jane, well, she told me Angie had big dreams from the time she was a little kid. And her passions, they grew stronger into her college years. She would often talk about those dreams and plans for the future with Jane and her stepsister Susan.
I think her biggest focus at that point was getting through school and getting done with school so that she could take over the world. Like, she just wanted to do big things. And as my mom said, that dream changed over time. And I think she was really just trying to find herself and figure out where she belonged and what would make her happy in the long term. And I think, like most college students, she wasn't really sure what that looked like yet. But I know her dreams were big.
Angie was not only majoring in communications, but also was dedicated to her love of Taekwondo. Jane said she was fiercely dedicated.
She was excellent. She was a black belt. She had been to some national competitions. In fact, she was teaching at the Taekwondo Academy. It wasn't long after she became serious about it that they actually brought her in to help work there. So she worked there part-time as a desk. She did some instruction. She did a number of things for Taekwondo Academy. She traveled nationally for tournaments that they had. And she was good. She was a black belt. I mean, she just was good at what she did.
Angie's sister Amber knew how much the sport meant to her.
We had divorced parents. It was tough growing up with divorced parents, and they gave her kind of a second family to go to when she was feeling like she needed a little extra help. So it was always really important to her to go to Taekwondo.
Like any other college-age young woman, it was time for Angie to move out of her father's house and into her own place. It's that independence we've all sought at one point. Your first apartment, living on your own, it's just simply adulting.
She went and lived with a friend for a while she went to school. And then she moved into her own apartment. But she continued like her normal life. You know, when people hear about a 20-year-old getting murdered, they're like, oh, what was she into and who was she hanging around with? You know, Angie was into being the queen of Taekwondo, getting straight A's, being on the dean's list. She was just a good girl. She was a good kid. And that wasn't any different when she was 20 than when she was 15. She had a normal teenagehood. You know, every teenager has some little rebellions here and there. Nothing drastic or dramatic. And it was kind of the same in college. It was such a shock because she was so loved and liked and known by so many and trusted, and she was just such a good kid.
Angie was dating someone off and on for about a year, but they were broken up by the time of her murder. Now, the breakup was about 2 months before she died. The family tells me that they, of course, met him, that he was a really nice guy, and they liked him. So there were no suspicions whatsoever around him. Before her murder in early 2013, Angie, she suffered an ankle injury. Now, she had recently gotten an MRI, and she was anxiously awaiting the results to see how severe it was. And as of May 2nd, she was to meet with her doctor and get those results to learn her future in Taekwondo, how serious this injury was. And so she was nervous about it. For this doctor's visit, Angie wanted her father, Steve, to come with her. The two were very close, and Dad was always there for her. What you are about to hear now is an extremely difficult interview, but it's really important that you hear directly from Angie's loved ones, having them tell her story. Now, Steve Sicola, he recounts the events that happened that day, May 2nd, 2013.
Well, I used to take her to things when she was in a scary situation. She had gotten an MRI at this place, and she wanted me to be there at the Colorado Orthopedic Associates. She really wanted me to be there with her when she got the results of the MRI. 11:30 a.m. Okay. When I got to the front desk, I asked, I think I'm here after she's gone into the doctor, but Angelina Sicola. And I just kind of said, and they looked around and says, well, she hasn't checked in yet. And I was like, huh? That's not Angie. You know, she's a stickler to time. Last time I think I talked to her was on April 30th.
Okay.
We didn't necessarily talk every day because she had stuff to do and friends to see and all this stuff. And but you know, she called me the night of the 30th. You know, when she wasn't there at that place at the Orthopedic Associates at 11:40. It's 11:45 now. I kind of started getting worried. Things that went through my mind was that, you know, maybe she slept in from maybe having a migraine or whatever. But you know, it was her day to have had a couple classes, I think, and then was supposed to switch her parking pass with Amber, because they shared one parking pass because they all had classes at different times.
Angie's sister Amber had a parallel timeline play out on this day, and unfortunately, her and her father's worlds They were about to collide.
Angie and I shared a school parking pass, and that was the day that she usually went to school really early, and I was on my way to school for a late morning class. We usually connected in the parking lot to pass off the pass and usually pass off parking spaces. So I would see her in the parking lot and take her spot, and then take a shared pass to the school, and then she would just go home. And I couldn't get a hold of her. I thought maybe she overslept. So we had a break from our class, and I went ahead and called my dad on the break and told him that I couldn't get a hold of her.
When I drove down there, as I got closer and closer, I got more worried and more upset. And I was relieved to find her car there, right? I didn't look in at the time. I was relieved to find her car there. But then, when I got to her apartment, it just looked like it was, set up for night with all the drapes closed, et cetera, et cetera. And then when I reached for the door handle, it was open, and that was, so I really got my heart in my throat. No, it was unlocked.
And the drapes were shut.
I walked in because I didn't have a key to the place. So I walked in and looked around, and then I found her. And that was the worst day of my life. And I just freaked out. So I know I screamed for at least 5 minutes straight. I just couldn't bear it, And, seeing her the way I saw her.
Then he called me about, I'm not sure how much later, and just kind of was in tears and told me that she was dead, and I was in denial. I asked him if he had called 911. He said yes, but he refused to do any CPR on her, even though I kept asking him to do CPR. I wasn't there, and even if it wouldn't have done any good. And so I just told my professor I have to go. Just drove over to the apartment, called my dad back, pleaded with him some more to do CPR. He just kept telling me she's gone.
On her last phone call, Angie's stepmother Jane and stepsister Susan recounted the moment they received that heart-stopping call.
Probably very shortly after he entered her apartment. It's kind of a whirlwind, that couple of hours there. Trying to remember exactly what happened, but I was in California. I was actually working in California at the time, and I had a long drive that day from San Diego. I had about a 5-hour drive, and I saw that Steve was calling, so I took the call, and he was still in her apartment. And so he told me he found her and that she was dead, and that he didn't really know anything else. I believe the police were already there at the time he called me. Yeah, I mean, he was, it was a crazy phone call. Nobody expects that call. And he was pretty hysterical, and I was pretty hysterical, trying to get myself off of I-5 before I killed myself on top of it. So that was how I learned. He called me and told me.
Susan, how did you find out?
I was leaving work, and my husband actually asked me to call him, And so I called him on my way home, and he said that he had something to tell me, but he wouldn't tell me until I got home. And so, of course, I knew something was terribly wrong, and I was begging him to tell me all the way home, like, what is happening, what's going on, and he wouldn't tell me. He was in Colorado at the time, and I was in Mississippi. And, so I pulled into my garage, and I got out of the car, and I said, I'm home, tell me. And he said, Angie died.
Steve finds his 20-year-old daughter dead in her apartment. No one knows why. No one knows how. The Colorado Springs Police Department, they launch a full investigation. Now, the family says Angie, she had a history of migraines, so at first they thought, well, perhaps it was something neurological that she had suffered. When her dad first found her body, he didn't notice anything obvious on her. The family thought that it could have been a brain aneurysm or some other unknown heart condition. So many scenarios played out. But the family would soon learn that Angie's death was no accident and it was no medical emergency. They got a phone call from detectives saying they wanted to talk. So the family gathered, and that is when they were told Angie's death, it's going to be ruled a homicide. It was then they were told how she died, hearing that 20-year-old Angie was strangled to death, and they called it forcible strangulation.
We went home, and they said they would come talk to us. They came to tell us specifically what was that they were ruling it a homicide based on the coroner's findings. The police were the ones who told us that she had been strangled. When they came over to our house to tell us that it had been ruled a homicide, I specifically asked if she had been raped. They said they couldn't give out those details at this time. We still don't know. The only details that they could give out was that she had been strangled.
Jane said among the many thoughts racing through her head is how can a black belt in Taekwondo get overtaken without a major fight? And that was one of many questions that detectives, they needed to answer and then match it to the crime scene. The family said Angie never ran in a bad crowd or even hung out with untrustworthy people. Her group was really tight-knit, just like her family. So this makes me wonder, was it a random act of violence or was it a crime of opportunity? Angie had no known enemies. Investigators questioned her neighbors. They questioned all of her friends and her coworkers. Nothing panned out. Angie's stepmom recalled a fleeting comment from Angie one day, and it was a comment now haunting her. Was this a clue?
The only thing notable about that is that when she came to visit me in March, when she stopped by the house, she was talking about the apartment, and we were just talking about life in general. And she just made a quick reference, and I shared this with the police, so I think it's fine if I share it with you, but she made a quick reference to the creeper that lived down the hall. She had a neighbor that just gave her a bad feeling.
Oh, yes, he was totally interrogated. I suppose if they have something else on him, I wouldn't know.
So just what did law enforcement have? They have released few details to the local media over the years, but Angie's family reveals more information to us. One thing that does stand out surrounding Angie's death is that Steve mentioned when he got to the apartment, the door was unlocked.
Would she ever leave her door unlocked? Would she ever come home from school and just not lock the door, feeling safe? Is that typical? Or, what did you come? What's your thoughts on if she would leave the door unlocked while home?
Let me first tell you that so Angie at home is a person that would pull her car into the garage, leave her keys in the car, leave her purse in the car, and that's how her car would sit in a closed garage. Angie lived in an apartment complex with outside entry. I don't believe that she would leave her door unlocked, but I'm not sure. I'm going to share something that hasn't been shared publicly, but I think it's interesting to share because it might open up some conversation. And that is that her purse and her phone were found in her car, and her door was found unlocked. And I have a personal theory about this that I also haven't shared with anyone, and it is, obviously no one knows what happened. I mean, the police know more than anyone, but I have a personal theory of what I think might have happened, because even though she was someone who would leave her purse in the car at home, I don't think she would do that in an apartment complex. And I believe her car was unlocked as well. And her phone, if you knew Angie, was always attached to her hand, and her phone was found in the car. So my personal theory, I guess you could say, because it's the only thing that makes sense in my mind, is maybe she was leaving her apartment. She got into her car. She had her purse, her phone, realized she forgot something, so got out of her car, leaving it unlocked, ran to her apartment real quick, opened the door to grab whatever she was getting, and was planning to head right back out, and something happened.
In that same thought process, I was going to add and say, do you think the person encountered her at her vehicle?
My inkling is no, and I say that because I don't know what this person's motive was. But why would you leave her purse? Why would you leave her phone? And that's one of the things that bothers me about it. If you did carjack her or get her at her car, I feel like you would take a purse, I think, unless you had a completely different motive. So from the outside looking in my perspective, I personally believe that she was met by this person at her apartment and not her car.
We've gone over it. I've gone over it a lot. There's multiple things that I think could have happened. She could have had someone over and it didn't go as planned. Someone could have been in the parking lot and just, ambushed her. Because as we've discussed, she has the skills to defend herself. But, when you're getting out of a car late at night, it's difficult to defend yourself in the dark if someone's going to ambush you. I feel like there probably was a weapon involved if she wasn't able to defend herself. It just seems like some sort of, again, ambush, surprise happened, because she always is very vigilant in locking her doors. Her phone's always attached at the hip.
And speaking of Angie's phone, Susan shared another key piece of information regarding the timeline. Remember that Angie was found dead on May 2nd, but neither Steve nor anyone else in the family talked to her since April 30th.
There is one thing I'd like to add, if you're okay with it, and that is, this happened at a time that social media was just starting to get really big. So I was on Facebook after this happened because I knew that Facebook had just come out with a thing that would tell you the last time somebody was logged in. So that's pretty common knowledge now. Everybody knows about it, but it was brand new back then. And so one of the first things I did when I got home was I logged in to see when she was last active on Facebook, and the date on there was April 30th. So that's one thing that I think would be interesting to get out. But knowing Angie and how connected to social media she was. I would assume that whatever happened that day, because she hadn't been active since that day. I think it's important because if people are just trying to rack their brains about one day when it could have really been another, it might be worth sharing.
That puts Angie's murder occurring between the night of April 30th and the morning of May 2nd.
And I think, if I remember correctly, when Steve found her, I think it was pretty obvious that it had been a while.
It's definitely been a difficult several years for him. You know, he got the worst of this, Steve did, because what he has is something the rest of us don't have to live with, and it is that the picture. My thought was that'd be the only way somebody could probably take her down is if they took her from behind and surprised her. That's what I thought, because she's a black belt in Taekwondo. You come at her from the front, I think she's going to try to defend herself.
I am not entirely sure. I mean, I have different thoughts about it. I guess going back to her Taekwondo, I wonder, you know, yes, you were a black belt, but if somebody is big enough, if somebody is strong enough, or there's more than one person, or they have a gun on you, I mean, your reaction is going to be different. And I think about the potential of somebody having a gun to her and maybe strangulation was quieter. You know, it was an apartment complex with people all around. It's all speculation, I guess. I mean, my personal belief is that this was done by someone that she didn't know or didn't know well. So for me, I don't think of it, even though, you know, history tells us that strangulation is personal. I personally don't get that in this scenario.
It has not been revealed by detectives whether or not Angie was raped, leaving behind potential evidence. But the family says police, they do have DNA. And with the DNA from the unknown source, they were able to rule out a few people of interest. Now, the next step with having DNA, if it doesn't hit in a crime database, it's doing the familial DNA testing, which is helping to solve cold cases nowadays with all of the advancements in technology and DNA technology. Angie's father, Steve, recounts another dramatically important piece of information regarding the crime scene itself.
I worry about whether a lot of evidence was taken from the scene to clean up after what they did or who did, you know what I mean? Oh, I did it, you know. I know that Thursdays were the days that she would always bring her laundry over to get cleaned. So one of my first things when I got in there was that I looked for that stuff and it was not there as the bed was stripped. And I saw some evidence of other laundry being there, but, you know, not that.
The incredible observation during Steve's moment of utter trauma and disbelief means the killer cleaned up afterwards, taking Angie's bed sheets, and also would have needed to then dispose of it somehow, somewhere. The Colorado Springs Police Department told me they have spent countless hours interviewing anybody who may have been associated with Angie. These associations could have been through her schooling, her extracurricular activities and hobbies, as well as people in her social circle. So, as of a result of many of those interviews, no suspect has ever been identified. And regarding the status of the DNA testing, detectives submitted items for potential DNA testing with all these advancements, and they do hope that a suspect profile will be identified. But, you know, until that day comes, her family, they share what they miss most about Angie.
You know, I miss her silliness and her laughter. I miss the joy that she had at Christmas time. I miss, you know, just the little unexpected things that she would say and do.
think I miss most just her overall presence. It was so unique. She really was her own person and the things that she loved and enjoyed. And, just because she was around didn't like what she liked, it wouldn't stop her from, enjoying it. And she was hilarious and funny and sarcastic and like all these wonderful things. And I just, more than anything, I just miss the presence of being around her.
At this point, unless there's some huge breakthrough in technology, I don't feel like it'll be solved. They've had I know they talked about the breakthrough with genealogy and all that, but just having a cold case out there for this long, in a town that's growing, with a crime rate that's growing, it's just getting more stale. It doesn't. I guess my hopes are not high. I see a day where if we choose to, it's going to be up to us to find that peace for ourselves, to find a new happiness, and to try and remember her the way she would want us to remember her, and live the life she'd want us to live, instead of living in the past and living that day over and over again until we waste away to nothing.
Steve feels it is a long shot in finding his daughter's killer based on the amount of time that passed and the time between her murder and when he found her.
It's emotionally messed me up bad. And I can say it's ruined my career. I can't think as well. I can't. It just doesn't work because, that picture is in my head forever. Like, first thing that comes to mind is that and everything that came with it.
I hope to hear from the family again one day, and I hope it's with the news that Angie's killer has finally been captured. And it's horrible to realize the person responsible for this. He is still out there. He's walking among us. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to Angie's story. And I hope to see you again next week.